Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Words on Whiskey, episode 38. And thank you very much for joining us on this cold, blustery evening in Dublin. We have a young, exciting, innovative distiller joining us this evening from Boann Distillery. And we're going to go to Drogheda now and just bring him in. We hope you're all keeping well. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to put them in. Michael, good evening.
Good evening, Sergeant.
How are you?
I'm very good. Sorry, my laptop flashed up 30 seconds before you brought me onto the screen that I wanted to reboot.
Well, go ahead if you want to.
I got a bit of frantic there for a second. I thought I was going to drop off. But
you're good, are you?
I'm good, I think.
Very good. That's the unexpected events of going live, which are, yes. So are you freezing yourself up there in Drogheda?
Yes. Bit of a change again. It felt very spring-like last week, but it's getting a bit wintry again. But sure,
yeah,
that's Ireland for you.
Well, I suppose the weather is the least of the obstacles at the moment with all the COVIDs going on. But you've been working away with no limitations.
No, thankfully uninterrupted. We've been deemed an essential service in Ireland, so we have been we've been able to keep working away. It did affect us obviously somewhat. We were in the late stages of commissioning when it all started off. So trying to get engineers and stuff back on site for any issues was a bit difficult. But no, thankfully we've been able to continue to work away in spite of everything that's going on.
Yeah, and obviously there's been a lot of noise coming out of Boann lately, and it seems that Boann have been around forever.
Yeah. Well, I suppose the distillery, we've only been in production for just over a year. But the Whistler brands and the distillery has been put together for a couple of years, so you'd probably seen bits and pieces. It was a little dot on that Irish Whiskey Association map probably for a couple of years. But there's a lot of very modern technology and a lot of automation in the plant. I was trying to count it there during the week, how many moving parts, how many bits are there, and it just became too much. It's definitely in the thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of moving parts. So the commissioning phase took a bit longer than most distilleries, but we got there, and we've only been in production a year, but it feels like we've done an awful lot in that year and made an awful lot of noise and done an awful lot of exciting things. Well, at least we think they're exciting anyway.
Oh, I'd have to agree with it. Very exciting with some of the work that you've been doing there lately. I suppose the family-run business of Boann Distillery, it's run by the Coonies, initially set up with Pat and Maura. And of course, their family or their children are very heavily involved as well. So it is very much a family business.
It is. So on show that side, but Sadian, Peter, Paddy, and James are all in. All bar one of the children are directly involved in running of the distillery and different aspects. Often you can probably, like Pat has been in the industry for more years than he probably want me to mention, but and has a lot of experience and took that experience into distilling world. And I can say that every one of the Coonies that are working with the distillery, I've learned an awful lot. I've been blown away by their enthusiasm, first of all. But they all have their own individual skills that are very valuable. They're all there as well, very much on merit. And it's great to be involved in something like that, where I suppose the directors or the higher ups are all based on site and are so passionate. When it is a family business, they're not going anywhere anytime soon. It means an awful lot more to them, and you can see that. And like, you have to start up a distillery to get a distillery off the ground, any distillery, you're going to have a hell of a lot of enthusiasm and a hell of a lot of passion for the project, because that passion and that enthusiasm will be tested an awful lot. Distilleries are very hard to get up and running, and especially the rewards don't come very, very early. So you're going to have the early years are an awful lot of hard work with very little reward. So you need that passion to get through. So blessed to be working with them.
Yeah, I mean, being a family business, they are very hands-on as well. So they're directly involved. It's not just their name is associated with. I know they're very hands-on on the business, and of course, they have a legacy in the beer and also in the cream liqueur side of it as well. They have a very successful cream liqueur business.
So they have a cream liqueur business down in Clonmel, in Mary's, and they would have had the Boann brew house producing beers, and they produce cider as well. They have their own orchards, and they would have had. They were at one stage they had Ireland's largest distribution network, so that they would have been selling and distributing and importing things like wine and so on. So a long history in the alcohol industry, both in sales and distribution, and in the production side of things. So all of the Coonies come in with a good degree of experience in the industry in individual aspects of it. So they have everything from the sales and distribution, like I said, and launching products. They've launched several products, both nationally and internationally, from the cream liqueur and the beer and cider side of things. But also obviously overseeing production of alcohol products.
Of course, I mean, there's more to producing whiskey than just the manufacture of the whiskey itself. Obviously, they have the experience now in operations and distribution and logistics and sales and marketing and the rest, which is great to take with them from the other interests into this. Yeah,
that's the reality. The stark reality of is that's the most important part. You can be the best distillery, the best distiller in the world, but if you don't have a good sales and distribution team, you won't survive. So it certainly has been a massive benefit, and already been linked with the cream liqueur side of things. It helps us get the foot in the door in all international markets. We're already distributing right across North America and Europe and Asia and as far away as Australia with the cream liqueur. So they're already dealing with these distributors and different outlets on that end. So it makes it a lot easier for us now when we're coming online with our own whiskies and with our own gins.
Yeah. Well, listen, we'll come back and talk about Boann a little later on, but I really wanted to kick off with you a little bit about yourself, Michael. So you're a young man, and you've done incredibly well to be a head distiller of not one, but this is your second distillery you've been involved in. But you want to take us back to, where you're from and where you grew up, and a little bit about how all this interest in whiskey came about, because it's not just, through direct contacts. It's, good experience.
So I'll get labelled that I'm Ireland's youngest head distiller, but I've also been working as a distiller for over 8 years, almost 8 years now, and a head distiller for most of that. I started and born and reared in Dingle. Did a renewable energy systems as in college. Emigrated like most of my generation to London, and then back in 2012 I came back to Dingle to spend a little bit of time with family before I was going to probably go a little further afield and head off to Australia. All right. And that kind of coincided with the founder or the Dingle Distillery getting up and running. And I I don't know. I never really thought at that time there was only the 3 distilleries in the country. It's not, or not even in the country, on the island. There wasn't something that you filled out in the CAO. It wasn't really an opportunity. There wasn't too many opportunities. It wasn't even on my radar to go working in a distillery. But when one more so landed on my doorstep, and a lady by the name of Leah O'Neill, who had a very influential part to play in my life, and advising me, was a great friend of the late Oliver Hughes, and she was insistent that I go meet the man, and go in and just see. She, as far as she saw his brilliance, and thought he'd be a great man to work with and to try. So as much to keep her happy and to keep my father happy, I suppose, I went into the Dingle Distillery. I met again the late Mary Furter at the door, who brought me up to the stills, on what happened just by pure coincidence to be the first day that they were ever running the stills in the Dingle Distillery. And I was handed a glass of the new make spirit, got chatting with the lads, and before I knew it, I was being asked if I could come back the next day and dig out the mash, and I've never looked back since. I maybe didn't like digging out the mash too much, but I've loved every second of being involved in this industry. I found it fascinating from the very first second. From that first day, no, it was made easier from the very first second I was handed a glass of whiskey or a glass of new make spirit. So that was a good start. But I started with Dingle and doing odd jobs and bits and bobs there, and tried to do as much courses as I could in the background and educate myself as much as I could in the background, and eventually got a role as a distiller, and then was made head distiller at Dingle, and spent a few years there before now coming up to Boann.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing that I can see the relationship between sustainability and renewable energy that you would have studied and the distillery, in terms of heat exchangers and all that side of it. How beneficial was that in actually your role?
Well, I mean, that, and I grew up on a dairy farm, so it's kind of like, it's hard to see how milking a cow and distilling whiskey would be in any way similar, but you're talking about heat exchangers, pumps, your thermodynamics element. It's all, it made it easier. In a dairy farm, you're pumping milk, or you're putting it through a heat exchanger for a very different reason, but it's all the same kind of, a lot of the same equipment. So that helped when in the early days when I was being given, would you keep an eye on this, keep an eye on that? It was quite easy. It was somewhat of an indirect transition, but there was a lot of crossover of knowledge, I suppose. And so obviously renewable, and I've left that part of my life behind, but it's a big part of the whiskey industry is to try and explore the renewable and sustainable side of things. And I'm very proud of where we are in Boann. We were awarded an Origin Green Gold. We were only one of 26 companies in the country, the only distillery to be awarded a gold medal this year by the Origin Green. So
so that Origin Green program is a program managed and headed up by the Board BIA to basically encourage businesses to be more sustainable and greener in their production methods. That's exactly it. Is to encourage and to acknowledge then those that do achieve a high standard. So there was a lot of that again goes into the design and the way the distillery has been laid out to recycle as much energy and heat as possible. Simple things like the heat from the pot ale is used to preheat the next charge into the distillation. All these kind of little things that have tried to reduce our carbon footprint or reduce our energy requirements. We're even, I don't know, you've seen the distillery, it's a glass fronted building, quite toasty and warm with the stills in there. So we're growing some fairly exotic plants inside in the distillery. Paddy's even managed to grow a banana tree inside there. So hopefully, I think down the line we'd like to grow some of the more exotic botanicals that we use in the gin.
inside in the distillery if we manage to. It's just proving difficult to get the humidity right now because it's very warm inside there, which is good for the plants, but it's quite dry. So trying to get that balance right. But as an overall, that's a small part of the overall picture. It's more so the recycling of heat and the reducing on the carbon footprint point of view that we were recognised this year.
Yeah, it's a big achievement, and it's not. I know there's an awful lot of work in actually get a lot of paperwork as well.
A lot of paperwork as well, which is all that credit goes to Sally Ann. Various on that.
No, well, congratulations on that. So you made your way from Dingle to Boann about a year ago. What was the reasoning for the move, and how did the opportunity come about? And what did you bring with you to Boann that you learned in Dingle?
Well, yeah. So it was about 2 years ago. I decided to make the move. I kind of was at a crossroads of like I loved working with guys in Dingle. I still have a great passion for what I did achieve and what they are continuing to carry on with in Dingle. But it was kind of one of those things. I was at the time, what was I, 28 years of age. I had been made many different offers over the years as these new distilleries start up, and nothing ever really took my interest too much. But it was one of these things. Was I going to stay with Dingle forever, or was I going to try and spread my wings and broaden my horizons a bit? And I met with Matt Healy. Some people would know better as Pot Stilled, who worked with the guys, or worked with us here in Boann, and I was up in Dublin for an event, and said I'd call up and have a look around, and I was just blown away. I was everything that he showed me got me all excited, and I don't know how deliberate. I still haven't got the truth out of him one way or another, but he'd show me something like the mash conversion vessel, and he'd go, and I could tell that I got excited. It's amazing. He said, all we need now is a head distiller to run it. Then he'd show me the nanotechnology in the stills, and I get all excited. And he was like, now all we need is a head distiller to do, and then go around and I don't know. I kept thinking like, if they did this, if they could do that, if they could do the other, and then the drive home to Dingle was a 5-hour one, where, to be honest, most of the 5 hours was thought up of dreaming of different things that the distillery was capable of doing. And so, I decided to
Now, I don't know, have we lost you there, Michael? So can you hear me, everybody? If you can hear me, could you please type something in the chat comments there? I think we've lost Michael. Could have lost me. Yeah. Okay, so people can hear me. I think we've lost Michael there for a little bit. Maybe the Wi-Fi has lost signal there. Let's wait and see. Yeah, we've lost Michael there for a second. So sorry about that, but these things do happen. As I said, Michael is, I would say, probably the youngest distiller, youngest head distiller certainly out there, and he has 6-7 years experience. So it'll be interesting to see his take on the whole industry and going forward. Anybody have any questions they'd like me to put to Michael when we get him back? I can see he's dropped off here, so maybe Windows insisted on the reboot after all. No. We've Sarah there. We've Paul Kane, Fionn there as well. Hope everybody's keeping well. I hope you're enjoying the podcasts. We've cut out the news section of the podcasts over the last few series, so I don't know if you'd like to see the news sections back, but if you do let us know, and I'll just keep on talking away there. I think we got Michael back. Let's see. We have a scrolling mic. You're back, Michael. Welcome back. I was rabbiting on there for a while, and I was wondering how long you were going to put me under pressure.
Sorry about that.
That's the link in Drogheda is pretty bad.
Yeah, this yellow warning is starting to have its effect. But yeah, I was saying that, yeah, so I got very excited and decided to take up the opportunity to come up and try and have a go at all of these different exciting bits of equipment that they had in Drogheda. So started.
It is very different.
In June.
It is very different. The setup, completely different. I mean, they're similar size distilleries in terms of capacities, I think. Or is Boann slightly bigger?
Well, Boann will be bigger. So the wash still in Dingle is 5,000 litres. The wash still in Boann is 10,000.
Yeah.
And we would have 8 10,000 litre fermentation vessels, where Dingle would have 5,000 litres. So it's bigger. Bigger and different equipment, but ultimately the same goal. So Dingle has the ambition to make the very best whiskey in the country or the world, and Boann has that very same ambition. Mainly single pot still focused, which was a big draw for myself as well. Mainly pot still focused, but to make the very highest quality.
Yeah, I know. Having spoken to you before and having visited the distillery, I mean, you are very interested on the historic side of things as well, and the tradition of Irish whiskey. And I suppose one of the questions I want to ask is, where do you draw the line as a new, young, up and coming hero, if you like, of the distilling world? How do you draw the line between maintaining tradition and pushing forward with innovation?
Well, I think the fortunate place for myself or anybody that wants to be innovative and pay homage to history is that Ireland had a great history and an established whiskey production, very established whiskey production that almost died out, a style that almost died out. So in moving forward, I'm really ambitious or really hopeful to try and make a lot of what would be classified as pot still, old style pot still, using things like oats, wheat and rye.
Yeah.
But by doing that, you're being innovative, because there's not much of or any of that being produced on the island at the moment. So you're being historically, you're paying homage to the distilling traditions of the country, but also being quite innovative.
Yeah. I mean, is that like you as I said, you are young, but you've so much experience as well. Is there a pressure on you? Do you feel a pressure on you to meet standards and push the boundaries and keep things at a level, or do you feel that you can be a bit more liberal with your processes and push the boat out without too much concern about the heritage side?
I don't know. Well, I suppose there is pressure. There's massive pressure with being young. I mean, when Oliver gave me the opportunity to head distiller at Dingle, like I was only 23, 24 years of age. Most of Oliver's, I think there's famously a revenue official in Distiller was insistent that they be informed of any more of Oliver's harebrained ideas, and many of Oliver's ideas seemed fairly stupid or to many, and I know that it would have certainly raised eyebrows when I got given the position. So there was pressure to justify that at the time, but I would put that pressure on myself anyway. Like I would never rest on my laurels. I genuinely am ambitious to make the very best distillate possible. Very proud. We were recently recognised as our new make spirit was recognised as being the best in Ireland there recently, and very proud. And that's the kind of the standard we want to push for, and that's the standard I was happy to work with in Dingle. That's the ambitions they had there, and irrespective of age or history or anything else. You're conscious of wanting to live up to that. And it's the same here in Boann. We want to make the very best spirit in the world. And there might be pressures, there might be whatever, but that's what I want. That's the pressure I want. That's the job I want to try and do. And it's great that that's expected. Or being asked of me, and that's the ambition that the Cooney family and the guys in Dingle had previously. But yeah, that's the caliber, the standard that they want me to strive for. So
I mean, it's great to have it's great to have the youth and the energy and the ambition, and I think that's really great in driving the industry forward. And if we can open up things and be innovative at the same time, fantastic.
Yeah, well, I think that was a big part as well about moving to Boann, and I'm fortunate that now have been part of commissioning 2 distilleries, or being with distilleries that have. So you're not having to pay homage or actually continue on with a distillation method or a distillation style that is maybe the distillery is already known for. Exactly. That's the beauty that the new head distillers have, or any of the head distillers that are taking up positions here in Ireland in new distilleries have. We are in a very fortunate position that we can put our stamp on the distillate. We can distill it to the style, or to our own specs, or to suit our own tastes. Where if I was to take up a position within a distillery that has been around for 50 or 100 years, obviously there would be a pressure on me to just replicate what has always been the case. So that's the beauty of where we are now in the Irish whiskey industry, that there is that freedom to do something new and exciting.
And of course, you have the advantage, I suppose, with commissioning, that you get to know the environment and the equipment intimately. So I don't know if intimately is the right word, but no, I just want to show people who aren't familiar with the Boann Distillery in Drogheda. Just to go through a few shots here. So this is the front view. It was an old car showroom, I believe, initially, wasn't it?
Yeah. Remnants of Celtic Tiger Ireland, an absolutely massive facility with big glass walls and everything, marble floors, intended to be a car showroom, I think. Yeah,
and there's the silos. I mean, like I said, when I visited it very much was a bit like a TARDIS, because we see a lot of it above ground, but there's an awful lot behind and underground as well. There's a huge storage underground. But here we have the stills. So where do the stills come from, Michael?
They're from Green Engineering in Italy.
Yeah. Okay. And what capacity and production capacity do you have?
So we would have a 10,000 liter. We have a 10,000 liter wash still. So 10,000. We're hoping in the very near future to move on to 24/7 production. So we would be producing about 1,500 to about 2,000 LPA per day, or pure liters of alcohol per day. It's about 20 casks of whiskey per day.
Yeah. So there's the 3 stills there, and I think somewhere on the very left, very left, you can see there's gin production as well capability.
Yeah.
So you are producing some gin, yeah.
Yeah. We're currently we have the gin produced and ready to go. We've 2 gin brands coming online, Copper Cloud and Silks. That's actually just kind of been held up at the moment by I'm not sure is it Brexit or COVID, but it's we're waiting on corks to bottle the product. But 2 very exciting gins that I'm very very proud of. One more classical gin in Silks, and one more contemporary gin using 3 different distillation methods, 3 different components to make up the one gin. 29 botanicals, a lot of them local, a lot of them even like honey and apple blossom from the Cooney's own orchards. So
and of course you have a basket. I was told that there's a basket there that holds the botanicals in the actual gin still itself, so there's almost direct contact.
So we have a vapor infusion chamber as well as macerating within the belly of the still. It's as good a still as you could hope to work with. So hopefully I managed to make quite 2 very nice gins that, like I said, will be hopefully launched early summer this year.
Yeah. Okay, so look, I remember, and I think I remember actually very specifically the launch of the Whistler range. I think so. November 2016, Whiskey Live. I remember Matt telling me all about it and seeing the range of Whistler whiskeys that were made available. And obviously they're sourced whiskey, but they were quite innovative in themselves at the time. There were different cask finishes, and of course that's been extended with a release of several more different releases, and I'll just share some of those there now. And let me see if I can do this without share. It's not easy to see through a tripod.
Right. Yeah, we the Whistler range, we've quite an expansive range. That's the original range that would have been launched. And a very good. If anybody's been fortunate enough to try any of them, they're the 7 in particular and the cask strength, they're very good. They are obviously sourced whiskies, but from the very beginning, the Cooney family have been keen to work with the very best of casks, and that's very apparent in them. So they're a sherry finish, beautiful distillates. But since then, we've moved on and started to source. I think we're sourcing distillates from 6, if not 7, different distilleries now in the country, and working with single malts and single grains, mainly.
You were telling me something about you've 30 plus different types of cask.
So in Boann we'd have about 30 different cask types. So we're very interested in pushing the boundaries as to fully exploring the capacity or the potentials of each of the distillates. So everything from fortified wines, muscatel, marsala, everything, you name it. We work with a very good
honey.
Well, that's your honey liqueur. So like I said, the Cooney family have their own apple orchards, and a very important part of apple growing is the bees. The bees have to pollinate the apples, and a knock on that is honey. So you have your cream liqueur, your Whistler cream liqueur produced down there in Clonmel, and then you have your honey, and then the double oak as well, which is just is a blended whiskey. But beyond that, we've our 12-year-old, we've the Bodega single malt, we've the Imperial Stout, which is a blend I'm particularly proud of. Was one of the first blends I put together when I came here. I can say I wasn't exactly as enthusiastic. I probably had a bit of an arrogance about myself from the time I worked with Dingle, where we only distilled and produced for ourselves, didn't sell to anybody else, didn't buy any distillate from anyone else, didn't think I needed any distillate from anybody else. But I've actually found it really, really interesting and really enjoyable to work with all these different distillates from all of these other distilleries, and blending together in kind of the hope that the blend will be better than the sum of its parts, in a sense. So taking maybe some sweet grain distillate and blending it with a more robust or unusual single malt from another distillery, and taking different bits and mixing them together. So it's been, and then obviously layering on with a cask finish as well. So I'm a lot more proud of the blends than I really thought it was going. I just thought it was a necessary part of the job, but I think they've all turned out. I'm very proud of all of them, and in fairness to the Cooneys as well, they're very fair. Most of the range is in and around the €50 or less price points for your single malts, your single grains. So very
that's
affordable.
The gin there, Michael. This is a new gin that's going to be coming out, is it?
Yeah. So we're waiting on the cork for that bottle. The gin is ready to go. The bottle is ready to go. Just the cork. And so it has TTB approval. So it'll be going to the States and obviously distributed in Ireland as well. So and hopefully early summer.
We don't need a cork. We don't need a top on it at all. We just ship it as it is, and it'll be fine. But
well, I can tell you, it's. I probably achieved as much, or if not more, in my gin distillation so far in my career, and I can say in my humble opinion, they're two fantastic gins, the Silks and the Copper Cloud. I'm very happy with how they've turned out. The stills in Boann are exceptional. Both the whiskey and the gin stills utilize what's called nanotechnology. So nanotechnology is we're the only whiskey stills, as far as I'm aware, the only whiskey stills in the world to utilize is basically. If you've heard anybody talk about whiskey distillation or gin distillation, they'll tell you about the importance of the interaction between the alcohol and the copper. That copper cleans the distillate, and the more copper contact you can create, the more you'll clean out that distillate. And so what nanotechnology is basically, it creates an uneven surface. So it basically has an uneven surface on the inside of the line arm of the still. And this vastly increases the surface area, which vastly increases obviously the copper contact. And obviously until you work with the stills, until you see how the actual distillate turns out, you don't know if this is just kind of airy fairy stuff. But I've blown away. It's incredibly clean. The distillate, it gives you so much more freedom then to play around with your cuts and when you're not having to work so hard to clean out any of these impurities in your distillate, it gives you so much more freedom to lock in more flavor profile. So the stills, the nanotechnology in particular has made my job a hell of a lot easier to achieve those high goals that we've set for ourselves, because the distillate in both the gin and the whiskey is incredibly clean.
Yeah, just to talk about that briefly, that nanotechnology, now it sounds possibly like a bit of a gimmick if you were just to hear about it, but obviously what it does is it increases the surface area and it has to be the vapor that makes contact with the copper for it to be effective, but it basically strips out the sulfurs, which are the non-nice tasting elements that would be going through to the next stage. Is that correct?
That's it. Yeah. So your sulfurous components and your different impurities like that are what give undesirable flavor profile. Certainly, like many more so in Scotland, where they have worm tub condensers, which reduce the amount of copper contact to trap more of that sulfurous character in it, but it's quite an acquired taste, to put it mildly. But so nanotechnology is quite a fancy name for basically it's a bumpy surface. So if you think of a flat surface, if you want to get from A to B on a flat surface, it's whatever. But if it's all little spikes and ridges and bumps, there's a lot more of a surface area there, and therefore a lot more copper contact, and does a far better job then of cleaning out of those different impurities, particularly the sulfurous components.
Yeah, of course. Then there is another element that I've seen there, and that's the mash conversion vessel. And perhaps you should also tell us through what mashing is really, and what this mash conversion vessel brings to the overall process that may not be possible in other distilleries.
Yeah. So mashing is one of the first steps in the brewing process. So basically, mashing is where you introduce your first two raw ingredients together. In the case of single malt, your malted barley and water. In pot still, you can use unmalted barley and other grains. But you mix in water, and you mix in water at specific temperatures. The temperatures then will activate enzymes within the barley. And break down long chain starch into sugar. So that's the purpose of your mashing. Your mashing is basically to break down the starch into sugar. For single malt, that's quite straightforward, because malted barley is packed full of enzymes. And basically you put it in, or you put your water in at about 65 degrees Celsius with your malted barley, and it will all convert into sugar quite easily. And then you draw it off. You draw off that sugary liquid, and you add in yeast, and that ferments into basically a beer that gets distilled. For pot still whiskey, it's a little bit more complicated, because for pot still you use, most recently mainly unmalted barley and malted barley. Unmalted barley has all of this same starch which can be converted into sugar, but has none of the enzymes. So you have to be a lot more careful to make sure to hit specific temperatures to really get the most activity out of your enzyme. And then when you make it even more complicated by adding things like oats into the mash bill, or rye or wheat, to break down the internal structures of oats and wheat and rye, you need different temperatures. So what the mash conversion vessel is, as opposed to a lauter tun, which is basically a big pot where you put in your barley and you put in your water, the mash conversion vessel is a big pot with a heated jacket on the outside. So that allows us to put in the water and barley, or water and cereal grains, into the vessel at a specific temperature, and then move through all of the different ideal temperature ranges. For example, using oats, you have a lot more beta glucan in oats. If you don't put it in, if you don't put the water in at a very specific temperature for oats, instead of getting runoff of sugary liquid, you get a big bowl of gloopy, sticky porridge. Anybody that's put hot water in with oats realizes it gets big, gloopy, and sticks together. But for us, we don't want a big, gloopy, stuck together mess. We want to run off all of the sugars. So we start at lower stand temperatures to activate beta glucanase, which will break down the beta glucan, and then we can go into different temperature windows to activate your alpha and beta amylase that'll break down your starches, and so on and so forth. And so it allows us to process mash bills that are far more complex than a simple single malt mash bill, which is relatively easy to convert from starch into sugar. So we worked a lot with Fionnán O'Connor, which you've covered previously on your show, but we also have our own house recipe, has malted and unmalted barley, as well as oats and rye as well. So
well, let's come on to that then, because obviously there's been a lot of coverage in the press lately about the historic mash bills that, and fair play to Boann for undertaking to work with Fionnán on, what some would consider quite a risky undertaking, a risky venture. And there is great to see that they're willing to basically put all their eggs into the production of that particular range of recipes. And I don't think we can mention how many recipes there are that were involved in Fionnán's research, but he certainly uncovered quite a few historic mash bills that have been recreated with your help and with Boann's help.
Yeah, so I suppose the reason Fionnán, just to give any background to those that aren't aware, Fionnán has researched and dug up all these many recipes from distilleries that were operating 100 plus years ago, and we've been tasked with recreating them. But a big part of the project was to then put those distillates in front of some of the most skilled or knowledgeable people within the industry, and to get their honest feedback, and of course to try and prevent any kind of information. We want it to be as much a blind tasting as possible. So obviously they'll have some bit of an idea that they're aware of the history of the industry and what would have been used at one time or another, but we're trying to make it to try and keep it as vague as possible as what is there. But it would have been things like oats, wheat, rye, as well as malted and unmalted barley that would have been used. And so look, people are giving me credit or thanking me. I couldn't be more passionate about this project. I'm incredibly honored to be part of it, to be in a position. I'm first and foremost a fan of the industry. I love pot still style. I love the history. I can listen to Fionnán romanticize about it for hours and hours on end, and I'll romance about it myself and dream about all of these different distillates, and only if what would Boann Distillery be like if it was still producing today, or what would any Rose or whatever, because they were the powerhouses of the industry at the time. They were sold all around the world. They were doing very unusual things, and it seemed that they were doing it because they were doing it. They had a certain degree. What you can also say about them, and most of them were very arrogant about the quality of the distillate they were making. And so what gave them that justification for being so arrogant, and it gets me very excited about what they could potentially be like. So I mean, I since Fionnán has been going on about this type of project for years, and I've been eager to help him achieve it every step of the way. And I'm fortunate that the Cooney family also share that ambition and that passion. But I mean, the reality of it is that, look, I don't want to sway anyone, but like it's again, to me, it seems like an incredibly, the reason that it's no longer really done is that it's a very difficult thing to do, to brew with all these unusual grains. But we are blessed, or I'm blessed to have the equipment in Boann to be able to process these grains. That mash conversion vessel allows me to process oats, wheat, and rye. So that obstacle isn't really there for me, where many of the other distilleries in the country kind of took brew kits that would probably be more similar to what's used in Scotland for single malt production, and they're so more catered to single malt production. We have the mash conversion vessel, which makes it easy for us relatively easy for us to process all of these grains. And so there's no reason not to, other than a desire not to do it. And the desire is the direct opposite. We couldn't be more enthusiastic for it. And I think we and the industry, we richly rewarded for that. I don't know if I'm giving too much away, but the distillates I've tasted are absolutely incredible.
I mean, you very generously shared with us those distillates as well. Really are mind-blowing. And, I'm very excited about what the future has to hold from Boann. But, and what was more difficult, working with the oats or working with Fionnán? Because oats are notoriously difficult.
Fionnán's a pleasure. The only difficulties we had with the whole process is that Fionnán, look, I'm very passionate about what Fionnán's trying to achieve as well, but like, we didn't want there to be any discussion about like, this one's different from that one because you distilled them differently or you brewed them differently. And obviously there's different ways that you want to brew with oats than how you would want to brew with wheat, or you'd want to brew with rye or malt. But we had to do a uniform brew method, uniform water ratio, uniform stand times temperatures. I could go into, everything had to be uniform. So the only difference is the actual grain. Now, if we were to do them regularly, that added in obstacles, because obviously you had to brew a certain way that suited maybe oats, even when there wasn't oats in the mash bill.
Sure.
And that was to satisfy the controller, to make sure that everything was to the same method. So that was the difficult. Sitting around and waxing lyrical with Fionnán was the easy part.
Yeah, I'm sure it was a great learning experience for both of you, actually. So, I mean, Fionnán with coming up with the mash bills and a fountain of knowledge on the history side, and then putting those into practice must have been a huge learning curve and a great experience.
Massive. I mean, like there's a lot of theory, and there's a lot of theory about all of this, and there's a lot of maybe thought about what way they could turn out. But I mean, we like, won't say the amount. We trialed all sorts of ranges of different grains and whatever, and we've analyzed them. We've learned so much. Like, it's incredible. I can't go into the amount of detail, but it's for someone there. It would never have been done in the industry. It's to learn. It's to fully explore what it was. It's a learning exercise, and I really did that. It blew, like, there was things that we never saw coming. From so many different levels that we can get into maybe more so when I can speak freely without risk of compromising the whole project. But certainly, like, I'm very blessed. Like I said, you said I'm very young in the industry, but to be able to have that experience and to gain that knowledge,
that's huge.
To be part of something like that is incredibly informative, and I've been blessed. But
I think a lot of credit has to be given, I think, as well, to Matt Healy, who has been a massive proponent of pot still, a huge supporter of what Fionnán's been doing as well. And, he actively sought you, if you like, to come on board as well. And, he's been, for pot still, he's done an awful lot. So if anybody's not familiar with Matt's work, you can listen to his podcasts and online. But how big an influence has Fionnu's work been on what you're doing beyond that project? So there is a heritage grain project which does have everything has to stay the same except the mash bill. Yeah. Taking that aside now, you have freedom and you've learned so much, I imagine, from doing that exercise. You can tweak lots of different parameters now for your own production and not have to worry about the academic side of things and produce popsicles that might taste better or are more suited to production of whiskey.
That's exactly it. I mean, any of these mash bills at any particular time were probably most likely done because that was what they thought was the best mash bill. We've been able to literally set aside 6 weeks where we distilled all of them, compared them, contrasted them, found all of the difficulties with one and the difficulties with the others, what worked with one recipe, what worked, what didn't with another, and are able to form our own mash bills, which is the only difficulty of it is that so many of them were so fantastic, and you think it would help to clarify it, but if anything, it just it set the mind racing as to what additional mash bills we could do. But certainly, it has given us a lot more actual concrete knowledge on what mash bills should work, and we've been able to carry that forward and tweak it for our own mash bill.
So I know one of the things you're doing is you're playing around with the mash bills, but for each mash bill you're playing around with the cuts then as well. So you're able to graph or experiment with one mash bill and the different ways of cutting that one mash bill and seeing what the effects are there.
So we're playing around a lot with cuts. We also have in Boann we have these reflux coils. So many of your listeners may have heard people talk about reflux in the distillation, basically, and this is often impacted by unusual shapes or sizes of stills. So Glenmorangie, for example, in Scotland, have the tallest stills in whiskey production. So as vapors rise up through the neck of the stills, they lose their heat energy and they condense and drop down. This is called reflux. And this impacts the flavor profile. Different distilleries then will have lamp glass or boil balls, like they have in Dingle, for example. They have boil balls, but we have in Boann basically a pipe that enters into the neck of the still, and there's like a worm coil, and it comes out, and this can carry cooling liquid. Mm-hmm. So we can turn this on and off and increase or decrease the rate of liquid flowing through, and this cooling coil impacts the rate of reflux as well. So like I said, there's no shortage to different ways we can and have been influencing the distillate. It's just trying to refine which ones we'll carry forward. But again, I'm very lucky that the Cooney family are and it's one of Matt Healy's buzzwords, and one he's very keen to advocate for is a physical flavor library, and it's something that I have the same feeling in Dingle and here, and it's tied in with our cask maturation program as well. We're trying to create as broad a spectrum of flavor profiles as we can. So that comes from the mash bill, it comes from the distillation method, it comes from the cask maturation policy. By broadening the range of different distillates, from heavy to light, from spry and lively pot stills to mellow and well-rounded sweeter distillates, all of these are being laid down. We're blessed. I'm not being pigeonholed into a corner of one singular distillate style, that we're able to fully explore and probably really test the boundaries of what can be done with pot still distillate. Because I mean, there wasn't too many back when I started in Dingle. We started pot still. We were only the second distillery after Middleton to release a single pot still. So it's good that's expanding, and that we're part of that as well here in Boann, that we're expanding it. But there's so much more scope to play around with pot still, and so many more flavors to explore.
Yeah. Well, when you started off, and we're talking, 8 years ago probably, had you any inkling that the Irish whiskey market was going to develop into what it has become?
Probably not. I couldn't imagine that there were so many people that were going to there's great credit due. There's great credit due, and sometimes they face a lot of criticism. Different people that are trying different things in new distilleries, but there's great credit due to anybody that puts their money where their mouth is and sets up a distillery, because it's such a costly venture. You need a lot of enthusiasm, you need a lot of passion, and some people make mistakes along the way. I've made plenty myself, but there's a lot of passion, but it's a very difficult road. And I would never have thought we would be at a position so soon that so many would have joined us on this crazy journey to try and to play a part. I don't think that they're foolish to do so. There was probably scope for all of these different distilleries. It was a sin that they had gotten to a stage where there were so few, and so it is very exciting. But I would never have thought, like, at that stage you're only 3 or 4 distilleries on the island. To think that we're at the stage now we're almost at 40 distilleries. Could never have envisaged that.
Yeah. How do you see your career progressing, and what advice would you give to somebody that wanted to enter the world of Irish whiskey, whether it be as a distiller or as a blender or whatever the role?
Well, I hope I continue to be as lucky as I have been and blessed with the different people that I have been able to work with, and that to continue to get the amazing opportunities that I've been given. I've loved every minute, or almost every minute anyway, of the journey so far. To anybody that wants to get into the industry, I wouldn't necessarily tell them to follow in my footsteps. It was quite an unconventional means to get at it, but I was very fortunate and very heavily influenced by 3 individuals: Leah O'Neill, Mary Furter, and Oliver Hughes, that all have unfortunately passed.
That's tragic in a sense, that 3 of the most influential people that you've had in your life have unfortunately left us. And I know Mary and Oliver I knew in particular, but hugely influential in the advancement of Irish whiskey, and hugely and in your career, I suppose. Well,
most people in the whiskey industry would be familiar with Mary and Oliver. Leah was a more personal friend, but she was a personal friend of Mary and Oliver. And Leah was very rarely went for her advice, but when I did, it was almost like having cheat codes at life. She was a massively influential person on my career. And then to learn from Mary Furter. Mary Furter's enthusiasm, the way she went about her business. Anybody that ever met Mary, you couldn't be. She believed wholeheartedly in everything that she did. She was incredibly passionate, always with a smile on her face, and never say die attitude. And the same with Oliver Hughes. Every idea that Oliver ever had was labelled as stupid or crazy or talked about in a negative way, until he was then labelled a genius 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years later for having that same idea. And so to have someone like that as so close, and someone like that had faith in me from very early, that rewarded my hard work and recognized my hard work was incredibly encouraging.
Absolutely, I can imagine.
Like I said, I loved every minute of the industry, working in the industry, and I find it fascinating, as many of your listeners find it fascinating. I was just fortunate that I managed to be introduced to a man like Oliver Hughes and be given an opportunity to work alongside Mary Furter and actually put that passion into practice. And so I can't say that everybody or anybody hoping to get into the industry would be so fortunate, but yeah, if I have a passion, or I probably have a belief, and it's shared by many, like Matt Healing, yourself, that goes probably beyond what makes sense to other people. To many, it's just whiskey, it's just gin, it's just like, why? But you have to for me, if I'm someday, I always think that someday this will be the whiskey that somebody will toast on their wedding day, or somebody will celebrate their retirement, or somebody will have a very special occasion. I want it to be the very best. If they're going to use or take one of my products into that occasion, I want it to be the very best, and I want to have thought about every aspect that has gone into it, from the grain to the brew method, to the distillation method, to the cask work, to the blend, to the packaging, that everything is worthy of that, and that every single detail has been thought about. And I love thinking about every part of it. I find it all interesting anyway. And so it's not interesting to everybody else. It's not whatever, but I've never been discouraged by that. I've seen it with Mary, and it's seen with Oliver, that it might not make sense to everybody else, and it might not make sense to many, but who cares? If it's what you're passionate about, follow that, and the opportunities will open up for you if you carry that passion. I don't know that anybody will be as fortunate as I have been in my career, but I certainly think that a passion and enthusiasm that I learned from those individuals will help in any walk of life, be it in the whiskey or block playing or whatever you want to be. If it's your passion, don't worry about it making sense to anybody else.
I mean, these are life lessons that that you picked up in whiskey. I mean, Oliver and Mary, they were both powerhouses and mavericks, and if that has rubbed off on you as well to some extent, I mean, the passion was there as well. I mean, are you more inclined to take more risks now than you might have been before?
I don't know if it's. I don't know if it's more risk, but I firmly believe, like I said, I firmly believe in everything that I set out to do. It might often seem like many of Oliver's ideas or whatever might have seemed like Oliver gave the impression that he just thought of it on the spot in the corner of a bar, and he didn't really think it through, and he didn't whatever. But Oliver would, if you went for a pint with Oliver, he'd be looking at all the nooks and crannies inside in the bar. If some fella was coming in talking absolute raw mate, he might pick something from that conversation. He was always switched on, always trying to learn, always thinking things through, and follow and thought things through to the nth degree. It might seem like he barely put any thought into things, but it was the direct opposite. So anything that I've done in my career might seem to someone on the outside as risky or whatever, or ill thought out. But I mean, when it came to the pot still mash bills, or when it comes to cask work, you're not just, or a blend, it's not just picking something out of the dark. It's not just taking a chance. There's so much thought that would bore the trousers off you if I went into the detail of what goes into.
Unfortunately, it wouldn't bore me. That's the problem. We have a few listeners here who might fall asleep, but I think you're frozen again on us, Michael. So if he has, hopefully he'll come back in shortly. But I mean, I'd just like to reiterate what Michael said there about the influences that Mary and Oliver had on the industry, and particularly, I suppose, Oliver with ourselves was a huge influence and a huge encouragement to pushing the magazine on. Just a few announcements there. Obviously, Matt Healy has to be congratulated. I think Fionn has announced the engagement there of Matt, and I'm sure Matt will confirm that today on the show. So that's our first engagement live on the show. If anybody else wishes to share their nuptials with somebody, please let us know, and we'll announce that on the next one. We have lost Michael. He'll drop back in shortly. Anybody have any questions that they'd like to put to Michael? Obviously, the infrastructure in Drogheda, the internet infrastructure is not as strong as... let me see. I've got him back. Welcome back. You keep on going out.
Yeah, I don't know. Was that a tackle? Was that the internet, or did you kick me out because I was rambling on?
No, I think it was the internet. I lost your picture there. So, yeah.
That's all right.
So tell me, where do you see Irish whiskey going? What are the biggest challenges that you foresee coming up?
Well, it's going to get very, very exciting for the average whiskey punter, because more and more of these distilleries are going to be coming on stream with their distillates. Like, we're talking about very exciting things now that we're doing in Boann, but the reality is you won't see the results of that for 5 or 10 years. But there's distilleries that are 5 or 10 years ahead of us, well, maybe not 10, but 5 years ahead. So they're starting to come online. It's very exciting. And then the distilleries like Dingle are Teelings that have been releasing already. Obviously, their stocks are going to mature further. So it's going to become, from a whiskey fan point of view, it's going to become very exciting. From a whiskey producer or whiskey brands side, I think it's going to become a hell of a lot more competitive. It's going to be a hell of a lot more difficult to stand out from the crowd, unless the industry continues and the sales continue to grow, which thankfully they have. The growth has been enormous, but the growth in production is also now enormous in the background as well. So it's going to be difficult for the distilleries. Many distilleries, obviously the most challenging time for any distillery is the first 5, 10, 15 years, because you have all of the overheads of production and very little of the rewards of actually being able to sell spirit. Your probably average distillery stock is probably 10 years old for most of the distilleries. That will be when they become fully mature distilleries. That would be their average age. So you're talking about producing for years without selling much. So many of them have been innovative. Many of them are blessed with the fact that distilleries are beautiful, interesting places to visit, and so had very good visitor centers. But unfortunately, that's been shut down with the last year or so. So hopefully that doesn't progress or continue much longer, because like they're first and foremost, almost all our distilleries, but the visitor center and all these secondary parts all obviously help to keep the business afloat. So that would be the main challenge for all of these distilleries, trying to weather the storm of the first couple of years of production, where your overheads far outweigh your
you mentioned one thing earlier, actually. You mentioned one thing earlier, Michael, which I thought was quite interesting, was the fact that you're sourcing whiskey from 5 or 6 or 7 distilleries. Obviously, when all these distilleries come online, do you see a lot more of that happening, where people like yourselves might be releasing a whiskey that is, a blend of whiskies from different distilleries and creating something bespoke? So you have a bigger palette to choose from, if you like, for releasing something if you don't have your own stock ready. Or even when you do.
Single pot stills, single malts, single grains are all very interesting. Blends are very interesting. And it's like I said, I touched on earlier, it's something that I probably didn't give the same. There are certain individuals like I would have looked down my nose a little bit of blending from other distilleries, and maybe the broader whiskey audience are probably like, sourced whiskey. But I mean, it is fascinating to be able to work with a distillate that another distiller would have produced. And obviously they have different distillation equipment, different production methods will produce different distillate. And then you take the character from that and blend it together. So whether it be cooperation between distilleries, whether it will be your blenders and bonders, that there are a few very, very good at it. There's a few that are out there that don't have distilleries that are sourcing distillate. It will certainly free up that physical flavor library, to use Matt Healy's term, is going to continue to grow and grow. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with sourcing and blending between these industries. You just further, it's like creating a new distillery. If you see, you take 2 distillates and you make something new, it's broadening the horizons further on. But the only thing is that there's only so many spaces on shelves in these whiskey shops or whiskey bars and whatever else. So we can't keep multiplying the whiskey brands. But certainly I think the blending aspect of it will continue to be a sizable proportion of the actual whiskey sales.
Yeah, I suppose aside from whiskey, and whiskey's, it's a full-time role. But what do you like to do outside of whiskey?
I like to go to the pub, but that hasn't been an option for a long time. Yeah, I'm still involved. I still play rugby and bits and pieces, and try to stay in touch with the lads from home. That way, we're not particularly good at that rugby, but it gives us an excuse to get out on a Sunday and go to the pub, and like we needed any more excuses. But yeah, no, that's the one thing that the lockdown has created. I moved to a new place in Drogheda, and my focus has been, by accident or more so than design, has been completely and utterly focused towards the distillery, which has helped myself, and of course that's been the case for all of the team. All of the team that are working with me in the distillery, bar the Cooney family, obviously moved to the area to work. They're all very passionate. I must say that as well. The team I have with me in Boann are incredible, but also that's been aided by the fact that we're all new to the town. We don't know anybody there. There's no place to go. Every place is shut. So everybody is focused in on the distillery and then going home and researching, or there's different lads getting qualifications in the background and researching, and it's all helped us to get far further in 1 year than we could have ever really achieved otherwise. But yeah, like I love the whiskey industry. I spend a lot more of my time outside of work attending tastings and bits and pieces like that. But
it's fascinating. I mean, you must. Do you miss Dingle at all? Do you get a chance to go down there and see family and friends, I suppose, as well now and again? Or is it lockdown just making it difficult?
I miss Dingle. That made last year. I miss Dingle. I miss Dingle. My hat on as well. I missed my barber in Dingle as well. But yeah, I miss the family and friends. Dingle is an incredible place. Like the beauty. I'd finish up work and go snorkeling or go out. I'd be into rowing, Nave Oaks, traditional rowing boat, and just getting out in the sea. I love being by the sea. Just hill walking or anything like that. It's an incredible place. But been pleasantly surprised by the landscape in and around Drogheda as well. In fairness, it's you've got your Mead there, and your plenty walks, and we're blessed to be by the sea as well when I'm allowed outside my 5K. But yeah, I do miss obviously the family and friends, and it's made more difficult because I haven't been able to get out and about in Drogheda at all since I moved up. But hopefully in the not too distant future, I'll be able to explore the town a little better.
Well, I have to say, Michael, thank you so much for your time today. It's really encouraging to see that there's the enthusiasm and the drive to be pushing past the intersection of where Irish whiskey is, and just be so nice to see what comes out of the next 10, 15, 20 years. But with enthusiasm and the knowledge that you have, and you're very generous in sharing that. So thank you very much. But I wish you just a great career. And, when you're drinking your whiskeys in 20 years' time, you're proud of what you've done and happy to be part of the great industry. So, thank you very much.
No, thanks very much. Thanks for having me on. And I'm very, very happy to. We're an open book. We're very proud of everything that we do in Boann, so it's very easy to be forthcoming. So if anybody has any questions about anything that we're doing up here, you can get contact with me directly or get onto our website. We have a very exciting cask program running at the moment, where we're selling casks for our own distillate, which is very good. But if you're not even interested in that, if you're interested in the gin, if you're interested in anything that we're ever doing, we'll hopefully one day be able to welcome everybody to the distillery. But until then, very happy if anybody wants to get any contact with us for any more information. It'll be a pleasure. But thanks very much for giving me the opportunity tonight to tell a little bit of our story to your audience.
Look, it's been fascinating. And for those interested in the cask program, we will be covering cask programs in the next issue at the end of the month in Irish Whiskey Magazine, and Boann featuring that. So some of those interesting mash bills that you have been working on and you've laid down, aside from the heritage ones, will be in that. So thanks very much for your time, and thank the Cooney family for taking the risk to, push the boat out, if you like. And again, congratulations to Matt on his engagement. And we'll see you all soon. So
Go on.
take care, everybody. Thanks, Michael.
Bye.
Take care. Stay safe.
Thanks again.
Cheers. Thank you. Well, that's inspiring to see a young man really pushing the boundaries and giving so much contribution to Irish whiskey. It's really encouraging to see where Irish whiskey will be going, and himself and many others, as well as the established ones, they are innovating and pushing the boundaries, and I think we've got a really positive future to look forward to. Thanks very much for joining us, and look forward to sharing the podcast with you on whatever podcast player you listen to, whether it's Spotify or iTunes or whatever it is, and we'll be putting the video live as well. So please support our station by subscribing on YouTube or on following us on Facebook, and we'll talk to you next week. Paddy's Day. So we have a special show on for Paddy's Day, and we'll let you know what all that's about. Stay safe and stay well. Good evening.